Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Meggi Rombach, a seasoned leader with over 20 years of experience in global themes, cross-sector partnerships, and complex organizational transition. Her career spans world-class organizations like Procter and Gamble, UNICEF, and the International Committee of the Red Cross. But after years of achievements and impact, burnout and chronic stress forced Megie to pause, to question success as achievements and instead ask what truly matters. That pause became a turning point, a redefining of success from the outside in to alignment from the inside out. Now, Megie brings clarity, calm courage, and intentional leadership to individuals and teams navigating their own life transitions and crossroads. Megie, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
All right. So yeah, for my question, I usually ask people, right? So for people meeting you for the first time, how do you describe who you are beyond your professional titles?
So I'm a hopeless optimist. I'm a
Mm.
dreamer. I'm an adventurer. I'm a nature lover and an outdoor person. So also in my coaching, my work, I often use analogies of, the mountains, sports, because that's really me. That's what I love doing.
Okay, wow. All right. So you've lived in a lot of worlds, corporate, humanitarian, global leadership. How did those experiences, shape your view of success early on?
Hmm. You know, Also thinking of your audience, what I would really encourage leaders is, to really dream big and follow their dreams. Because, my definition of success has changed over the years quite a bit. So I'm actually a small town girl. So I was not, born into a privileged place or into my parents. My dad was a chemist. He's retired, but he was a chemist, so kind of really kind of humble background. And I went to a pretty well-known business school at the time in Germany, and then somehow I found myself on this career track and ended up at Procter Gamble. And I think often when you're early in your career, you're just tempted to get on that ladder and start climbing. And that's for
Mm.
all means, go for it. But also just be aware, your definition of success will change over your lifetime. And that's totally cool. I somewhere so at some point heard the saying that in your 20s, you just explore. In your 30s, you figure out where you want to go, and your 40s, you want to get there. And then also I started asking, okay, so what do you do in your 50s then? But that's a different story. So for listeners that are at the beginning of their career, it's really also the moment to just go wild and explore and even test a little bit what success means to them.
Mm. Wow. All right. So yeah, I want us to move to, transition and identity. So you mentioned that burnout forced a pause, right? So what did that pause reveal about your life and priorities?
Hmm. So I had two burnouts throughout my career. I had one over 10 years ago and one
Mm.
not so long ago. And both of the times I used it as an opportunity to pause, to question, and to redirect. So the first time I was in a really competitive private, I was when I was at Procter Gamble. So I was really competitive private sector environment, surrounded by smart people doing great stuff, but it was just not me. It was not my style. It was probably too much pressure for me, but also I was looking for something with more meaning. So at that time, I paused shortly, and then I went on a sabbatical that was offered at Procter at the time in Cameroon with UNICEF. So I went
Mm.
there for a few months, and then I came back and I really wanted to go more into that environment. So I quit my job. It actually took me 2 years to do the full transition. So the burnout was kind of the trigger to cause that. Similar last time, which was end of 2023, because then I spent 14 years at the Red Cross, and that was my dream job. And I appreciate every minute I spent there. But more recently, I had already said, like, oh, I'd like to more go into coaching. I had so many ideas of what I wanted to do, and I always postponed it. But at the same time, I got more and more worked up at work. I was more stressed. I was less fulfilled. So I sadly almost had to hit the wall again to finally stop and to say, like, okay, no, now, really, what do you do next? And then, I mean, what helped me with the next step was also that, we went through a financial crisis. I lost my job, but in a way, it was the kick in the butt I needed to say, okay, now I really start doing what I wanted to do. And that I was not courageous enough to do.
Wow. All right. So yeah, when life, throws you off course, right? What's the first honest question a person needs to ask themselves?
Hmm. I guess it depends how you're thrown off life. There are many
Mhm.
ways we could be thrown off life. And I really believe in every challenge, there's an opportunity. So first, I mean, the first important thing is to allow the emotions, whatever comes up. Because people might be sad, they might be frustrated, they might be angry, whatever it is. I think the first important thing is to allow that, to not get stuck there, but to also not to, put it under the carpet and, pretend everything is fine. I think it's really important for emotions to get out and to allow yourself go through them, but then also to pick yourself up and get up. And when you get to that point, to become really curious, to really look at, okay, what got me there? What is because sometimes also the things that are thrown at you, they're external. It's not your influence, like losing a job. It's nothing you can do about it. You're fired. What do you do? I mean, unless you're fired because you did something extremely wrong. But in many cases, it's just circumstances. Um, but even then to look at, okay, what's actually in my control? Because often when we're in these situations, we get so worked up about all the things happening to us. But that's another great saying I came across, which is basically, you cannot influence what happens to you, but you can influence how you react. And you always have a choice about how you deal with it. And yes, sometimes life throws some really difficult things at you. And that might also mean that you go through a phase that might be shorter or longer, a few months, maybe even a year, where life is not easy, but eventually you'll get out of it. And chances are you'll get out of it stronger. So in that phase, to really stay curious and look at, even if it's small things you can do. To use one of my sport analogies, so I had several injuries over the years. And then I would get really, I had like a torn ligament, like an injured knee or something. And I would really get frustrated because I was basically for half a year, I couldn't move, or I could really only limitedly move. But I was like, okay, fine. Right now, I cannot do sports, I cannot run, but I can walk. So I was like, okay, now I'm just going to walk more. So I would encourage people to find their equivalent of walking. If you cannot run yet, okay, what are the small steps you can do that will take you into a better direction?
Wow. Okay. So it's taking, baby steps as long as you're moving forward, right? Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, I want us to, talk about leadership and presence, right? So you worked with leaders on presence and intention. So what does it mean to, lead with presence rather than performance?
So yeah, and also presence and intention is kind of like two different topics. So when I talk about presence rather than performance, and it also links a little bit to what I now call my mindful rebellion and my Played by Your Rules podcast. So the whole idea is most of us are grown up with a lot of shoulds, that are implied either by our society, our family, or a whole mix of that. And that also, even top leaders have the same issues. So often we're in this performance wheel or this climbing the ladder. And sometimes that gets really stressful and a bit inauthentic. So when I talk about presence, what I encourage leaders to do is to really find out what's really them, what's their unique being, and then show up, from a calmer place. We're not so much under the pressure of performance. And one tool that helps me a lot is mindfulness. So I've really, and I've come across that 10 years ago and I thought like, oh, that's fun. I should do it more. And I didn't take it seriously. And only after I hit my second burnout, I went through a full mindfulness-based stress reduction program. I really made it a habit. And really small mindfulness exercises, even if it's just like 2 minutes, like mindful breathing, or all these things can help to put the stress level down. And then that helps also to have more presence because you're less under the pressure all the time.
Yeah, well, all right. So, I was going to ask, right? Like, how does leadership, change when someone shifts from doing to being?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let's maybe even start with defining leadership, because I've investigated a little bit about midlife leadership. And when I did that, I realized many people react to the term leadership. So I realized what it means for me is not necessarily what it means for others. So for me, a leader is not necessarily only the top guy with the stripes on their shoulders. Of course, they're hopefully good leaders. But for me, leadership is really a mindset, and it could be anybody who has a strong idea and has people that follow them. So it can be also at much more junior level. You can be an amazing leader, even if you don't have the ranks left. And now so that's when also the authenticity comes in. It's this whole idea that the more we're in this hamster wheel, yes, we might be great performers, we might still deliver great things, but chances are that we're maybe a bit less inspiring leaders because we're so much caught up in just doing the next thing. So the being really connects again with the presence. The more we manage to get clear on who we really are, and that's a lifelong experience, because particularly at the beginning of the career, when one probably is not as self-confident, it's hard to already know, and it changes over the time. But the more we can just be ourselves, then it's more coming from a place of being and less from a doing. And just to give you a really stupid, concrete example, so as I said at the beginning, I'm hopelessly optimistic. I like to crack jokes, even when sitting in big leadership meetings. And I always bring in like my sports, horse lover side of things. And I was hiding that a bit from work for a long time. But then I thought, like, well, why? That's part of me. And actually, that taught me a lot of things that I bring to the workplace, because, for instance, working with horses, it's just amazing. They're mirroring your emotion. So if you're stressed, the horse will stress because they pick up the emotion. So you learn that you learn being calm by being by horses to reassure them. But that also brings you more into a state of being calm. So I just started bringing more of that in me outside work to work. And then I noticed that actually people thought that was interesting because they could see the whole person. And it's a hard thing to dare doing and to get there slowly. But then when you see that people actually, people want to know people. They want to understand who you are as a person. They don't only want to see your achievement. And the more you allow that vulnerability, the more the people can see the real you and appreciate the real you.
Wow. All right. So yeah, I want to talk about, resilience and burnout. So burnout often, feels invisible until it's like debilitating. So how can people, recognize it early? Right?
Yeah. And yeah, so it's a few things that come up. So first is, burnout often is caused by stress. Actually, it can be caused by two things, because also I'm exploring that right now. And burnout can also be caused by bore out, by be so bored, like at a point when you're not stimulated anymore, you're not stressed, but you're just bored, and that can eventually also lead to exhaustion. But then the more classical burnout is probably more often caused by stress. And then there's two types of stress. There's chronic stress and acute stress. And acute stress is actually a good thing, or it can be a good thing, because typically it's like, I don't know, I have to deliver that paper in a week's time, or I have to write this exam in a week's time, or I'm running a marathon and it's true. It's something that is timely bound, that is stressful, but once the stress is over, you can go into recovery. The problem with chronic stress is that it's chronic. It's often invisible. It's like the little toxic environment, the nasty comment every day, the rolling the eyes in a meeting. It's the things that are not loud, but they eat you up little by little by little.
Mm.
And that's the one that also harder to spot because you don't even notice when you're getting there. Also, one thing, because you also mentioned resilience, my psychologist actually defined resilience to me as resilience is having options. So often we also end up in burnout when we feel like we don't have options anymore. So how could one prevent burnout? First is always keep an eye on different options. Option in terms of what could I do in the situation? Maybe also options in the sense of if I'm really unhappy in my current job, what other jobs are out there, maybe in the same company or in a different company. So having options is already helpful. And then, yeah, paying attention to yourself. I mean, there are many signs of when burnout starts creeping up, and people can quickly Google that. I don't remember all of them, but often it's the most committed, highest performing people that are actually at highest risk because they care so much, that they want to give so much, that when they cannot give as much as they want to, they start feeling the pressure. It's also when the smartest people suddenly get quiet, probably already is something eating up on them. And then the more physical symptoms are when you struggle sleeping, when you're maybe really not motivated to come to work. It's Sunday evening, you really don't want to go to work on Monday. So I think there are a few things where you can pay attention to just say like, okay, is this temporary? It's just like a stressful period this week and next week. Or has it been just a little stressful period for the last year? And actually, this is much more chronic and I have to pay a bit more attention to it.
Okay, wow. All right. So yeah, I want to, move to my audience, right? Because my audience, right, is for young adults who are, trying to go on the path that you've been on. So we need advice from professionals like you, right? So many young people today, they feel pressure to, have life figured out, right? So what is the most important mindset shift for them?
It's a permanent beta. You don't need to have it figured out. It's a constant evolution. And particularly now they say with all the technological changes, many of the jobs today, they change. And many of the jobs of tomorrow, they don't even exist yet. So one thing is to maybe focus on skills more than just specific, like degrees or types of work. So for instance, like they're like this 4 or 5 C's, like the 21st century skills, communication, critical thinking, creativity, curiosity. These the type of skills that are useful no matter what you choose to do. So these are the things that you can build and then you'll be able to use it anyway. And it's also taking a bit the pressure away that you have to figure it out because you're not necessarily now and forever in the job you're in. So for instance, I mean, I started my career in, are you talking to me? Sorry. No, I keep going.
Sorry, I didn't know I muted my mic. Yeah, you could talk. You could continue talking.
Okay, then you can cut it out later. Yes, so no, to also normalize that, young people don't have to figure out the one job forever and ever. I start with something you feel passionate about. Maybe start with something that really challenges you, because when you're in your 20s, that's when you have all the energy. Maybe you want to push your limits, you want to see where your limits are. But then also when you hit your limits, that's fine. And then you can readjust and you can say, okay, now I tried this, now I want to do something slightly different. And maybe, to also dare to challenge the societal expectations, whatever they are. I don't know, you're based in Nigeria, right? So I don't know if that's you have to be married soon, or if that's for, I don't know, you have to get a certain status. Test out what's relevant for you, like for the listeners, and then dare to find your own way. And that might be that maybe you get married a little bit later, maybe you don't get married at all, maybe you pick the big job, or maybe you don't care about the big job. And actually, what you want is to stay home and do gardening. I'm exaggerating, but just to say it's so tempting to follow the pressure,
Mm.
and we don't need to. But go out and try and see where what feels right. And if in 10 years' time it doesn't feel right anymore, great, then you change.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, so this was actually like what you said right now is actually very insightful, and I feel like you've given enough advice already to the young adults, right? So I want to, ask you like what does it feel like to, intentionally live in your everyday life? What does intentional living feels like in everyday life?
So often we are so busy that we just rush.
Mm,
And that links again to the pausing. Living intentionally, it's basically to really, maybe some people even set intentions for the day. I don't go to that level, but sometimes to really be clear what you want, maybe from your job. So already you can play that at all scales. Either it's for your
mm,
next job, for your career, at least have a plan or an idea what you'd like to have, and then you see where it deviates. But also, to give you a really concrete example, I've recently gotten into public speaking. So, I'm part of a Toastmaster club. And we had our little club competition. We're a small club, it's nothing huge. So I competed for the first time and I got really nervous. And I was like, how do I deal with that? And I'm competitive. So secretly, I wanted to win, but
mm,
I didn't even want to admit that to myself. Also, people are much more experienced than me. But I was like, okay, so what intentions do I set myself for the competition? And I said, like, no, actually, what I want to connect with the audience. I want to have fun. Ideally, I don't want to forget my speech. And then,
mm,
yes, whatever the result is, the result is. So the beauty is when you focus on intentions rather than objectives, you get less disappointed. Because, I had fun, and so it's easier to, yeah, it's in a way, it's a philosophy how to live your life, and I find
mm.
it can be really rewarding.
Wow. All right. So yeah, this has been really engaging actually. And I hope my listeners, would li take this advice you've given to us, right? And then put it in their daily life so that we could all live better lives, because that's the purpose of this whole thing, right? So yeah, there's this segment I want us to go into. It's like a rapid fire segment, right? It's you just have to pick one of these things. So number one, I would ask you, would you pick clarity or comfort?
Hmm. Clarity.
Ooh, okay. So would you pick purpose or performance?
Purpose.
Purpose. Okay. Identity or income?
Identity.
Identity. Wow. Wow, that's surprising actually. Right. So would you pick, may I ask you, why would you pick identity over income?
See, maybe that's a mid career thing, because you know I pushed myself to a level where I had a really good income, and that's where I had my burnouts. So at that point you realize, so currently what I'm building, and I'm not there yet. So I'd like to land on that sweet spot where I have sufficient income to have a worry-free life,
Mm,
but where I can focus more on the identity, where the income, I would want to have the income for like financial security, so that I'm cool, but not as the aim to get to huge income.
okay, wow. All right. So yeah, that's quite understandable actually. So would you pick growth or stability?
Growth.
Okay, wow. Yeah, so this has been amazing. And finally, I would like to, ask you, what's one belief that, keeps people stuck in transition?
It's the fear. I think so there's a really good book. It's a really old book, but I only came across it recently. But for the younger listeners, if you already read it now, it might be really a huge help. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And
Mm,
basically what it does, it normalizes fear. Because everybody's afraid, like even I don't know, the pop stars, before they go on stage, they're afraid. The difference is what you do with that fear. And the other bit that helps in that context, in your body, fear and excitement has the same symptoms, like your heart beats up, your hands sweat, so if you start reframing fear as excitement, that can already unblock you.
Okay.
But sometimes it's just fear. And then if it's really fear, then you have to see how to deal with it. But like in some situations, it's somewhere on that spectrum where you can reframe it as excitement.
Okay. All right. But sorry, it's supposed to be my last question, but I'll move to ask more, right? So,
Go for it.
yeah. So if it is actually fear, right, how can one overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I've been in a situation where I was really, really afraid, worried. And so what helped me in those situations was positive mantras and breathing. If it really comes to the point that you almost have panic attacks, I mean, again, it depends how far you're on the fear spectrum. If it's more a rational fear, there's one really simple exercise that can help. You actually write down on your paper, you do two side circles, and in one, you write your story, your fear, whatever you tell yourself, like, oh my God, I might miss that exam, blah, blah, blah. And then on the other circle, you write what's actually happening or what actually happened. So that can help you get objectivity. And then often you already see, okay, maybe my fear is not, it's not that bad what it looks like. If it's really fear, it's like really physical fear that you get to the level of like you panic, or it's really, it's almost like a tantrum of a child, when you're so much in the emotion that you cannot get out of it, that's when positive mantras and breathing can really help.
Okay, wow. All right, Meggie, this has been, deeply insightful and enjoyable, actually. So thanks for sharing your journey, your clarity, and your wisdom with us. And yeah, thank you so much for that, actually. And thanks before I conclude, where can listeners get to know more about you and what you do, basically?
Sure. So first of all, really, it's been my pleasure. And, recently I've been talking a lot to midlife people and it's actually a pleasure to talk to you and maybe share some of what I learned with the younger generation. So I'm on LinkedIn. If people Google my name, they can find me. And also I have my own little podcast. It's called Play It by Your Rules. So that's also where people can check it out and see if that resonates.
Okay, wow. Thank you so much for that. Really do appreciate. So yeah, thanks for tuning in to Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, make sure to share to someone who you think might need this, and also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. Thank you, Megie. Do have a wonderful day ahead of you. All right, bye.
Thank you. Bye.